Have you ever wondered why some people seem to keep growing year after year, while others stay in exactly the same place even though they're just as intelligent, capable, and ambitious? The answer might be more uncomfortable than you think, because staying average isn't usually the result of bad luck, lack of talent, or a shortage of opportunities. It's the result of habit, tiny, seemingly harmless behaviors repeated so often that they become invisible. The scary part? Most people don't realize they're practicing these behaviors every single day. They're unknowingly training their minds, routines, and expectations to settle for less than they're capable of. And over time, average stops being a result. It becomes an identity. So what are these hidden patterns, and why are millions of people reinforcing them without even noticing? Nobody wakes up one morning and decides to become average. In fact, if you ask most people what they want from life, their answers sound remarkably similar. They want success, freedom, meaningful work, financial security, a life they're proud of. Yet despite these ambitions, many people end up living far below their potential, not because they lack ability, not because they lack intelligence, but because they unknowingly participate in an invisible training program every single day, a program that conditions them to think smaller, aim lower, and settle sooner than they should. The strange thing is that this training doesn't come from a single source. It's everywhere, in schools, workplaces, social circles, media, even in our own routines. Consider what happens when someone has an unusual idea. Maybe they want to start a business, learn a difficult skill, change careers, move to a different country, write a book, build something ambitious. What's the first response they often hear? Be realistic. That's risky. What if it doesn't work? Why not do something safer? These comments usually come from people with good intentions, but over time, they teach a powerful lesson. Don't stand out, don't take risks, don't challenge the norm, stay within the boundaries that everyone else accepts. And after hearing this message enough times, many people stop questioning it. They begin confusing safety with wisdom, comfort with happiness, conformity with success. Psychologists call this social conditioning, the process through which repeated messages shape our beliefs and behaviors. The more often we're exposed to an idea, the more normal it feels, even when that idea limits us. Think about the average person's day. They wake up and immediately check their phone, scroll through social media, consume other people's opinions, watch other people's achievements, compare their lives to carefully edited highlights. Then they go to work, follow established routines, return home exhausted, and seek entertainment to escape the stress of the day. Tomorrow they do it again and again and again. Nothing in that routine seems dangerous, yet every day it reinforces passivity rather than growth, consumption rather than creation, reaction rather than intention. Months become years, years become decades, and eventually, many people wonder why life feels stagnant. The answer is often hidden inside the habits they've repeated thousands of times. Because excellence isn't an event, it's training. Average is training too. Every action sends a signal to your brain. Every habit reinforces an identity. When someone repeatedly avoids difficult challenges, they train themselves to seek comfort. When they constantly delay important goals, they train themselves to accept procrastination. When they spend hours consuming information without taking action, they train themselves to become spectators instead of participants. The brain adapts to whatever it repeatedly experiences. This principle, known as neuroplasticity, is one of the most powerful discoveries in modern neuroscience. Your brain literally changes based on repeated behaviors. The activities you practice become easier. The behaviors you repeat become automatic. The thoughts you reinforce become beliefs. In other words, you're always training yourself into becoming someone. The only question is who. And this is where the real problem begins. Most people assume average is the default state. It isn't. Average is often the result of repeated choices that slowly lower expectations. A person skips one workout, then another. They postpone one goal, then another. They avoid one uncomfortable conversation, then another. Each decision seems insignificant on its own, but together they create momentum. And momentum is powerful because once a pattern becomes normal, breaking it feels difficult. That's why so many people remain stuck even when they desperately want change. They're not fighting a lack of motivation, they're fighting years of conditioning, years of training themselves to stay exactly where they are. But if average is learned, there's something incredibly important hidden inside that realization. It means average can also be unlearned. And that possibility changes everything. Because the people who achieve extraordinary results aren't necessarily born different. They simply understand something most others don't. Your future is largely determined by what you repeatedly train yourself to become. And that's where the story takes an interesting turn. If most people are unknowingly training themselves to stay average, then the obvious question is, what do exceptional people do differently? The answer isn't that they possess some rare talent or secret advantage. In many cases, they simply train themselves in a different direction. While average people often focus on immediate comfort, high performers focus on long-term growth. And those two paths lead to very different destinations. Think about any skill worth having: writing, public speaking, investing, building a business, learning a language, getting physically fit. In the beginning, all of them feel uncomfortable. Progress is slow. Results are invisible. And that's exactly why most people quit. They're addicted to evidence. They want to see results before they're willing to continue. But growth rarely works that way. For a long time, it feels like nothing is happening. Then one day, the results become impossible to ignore. This is what makes consistency such a powerful advantage, not because it's exciting, but because it's rare. Most people underestimate the power of small actions repeated over long periods. They focus on dramatic changes instead: a new year, a new goal, a new productivity system, a sudden burst of motivation. But motivation is unreliable. Training is not. The people who achieve remarkable things don't rely on feeling inspired every day. They build systems that keep moving even when inspiration disappears. A writer writes, an athlete trains, an entrepreneur learns, an investor studies. Not because they always feel like it, but because they've conditioned themselves to act regardless of emotion. Over time, those actions become part of their identity. And identity is where real transformation happens, because people tend to behave in ways that are consistent with who they believe they are. Someone who sees themselves as healthy naturally makes healthier choices. Someone who sees themselves as disciplined acts differently than someone who believes they're lazy. Someone who sees themselves as a creator approaches life differently than someone who sees themselves as merely a consumer. This is why changing habits alone isn't enough. You must change the story you tell yourself. Every day, whether you realize it or not, you're casting votes for the person you're becoming. Every workout, every book, every difficult conversation. Every hour spent learning instead of scrolling. Every action strengthens a particular version of yourself. The question isn't whether you're training. You are. The question is what you're training for. Average people often train convenience. They train distraction. They train avoidance. They train short-term thinking. Extraordinary people tend to train disciplined focus, patience, resilience, and perhaps most importantly, they train the ability to do difficult things long after the excitement has faded. That's why success often looks boring from the outside. It's not built through dramatic moments. It's built through repetition, the same habit, the same standards, the same commitment, day after day, month after month, year after year. Eventually, those small actions create a gap so large that it appears as if successful people are operating in a different world. But the truth is far simpler. They didn't suddenly become extraordinary. They gradually trained themselves to stop being average. And that's the lesson most people miss. Your future isn't being created by the goals you set. It's being created by the behaviors you repeat. Because every day you're running a training program, every choice reinforces something. Every habit strengthens something. Every routine builds something. The only real question is whether that program is moving you toward the life you want or quietly keeping you exactly where you are. Now take a moment and be honest with yourself. What's one habit in your life that's training you to stay average? And what's one habit that could completely change your future if you committed to it consistently? Share your answer in the comments below. You never know, your insight might be the wake-up call someone else needs today. And if you enjoy exploring the hidden psychological forces that shape success, potential, and human behavior, subscribe and join us for the next deep dive. Sometimes a single idea can change the trajectory of an entire life.